Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, yWhales, wherever you are today. So it's October 10th. Bitcoin's doing its bear market thing. Nothing super exciting there. But today is probably one of my most exciting interviews that I'm really been kind of waiting for weeks to have, because these guys are booked out so far, and so am I. And it's a metaverse conversation, but it's not the typical metaverse that we've had, where we're talking about pretty looks, and kind of just proof of like, hey, it's there just because it's there. We're talking with the team, RP1, that actually is building the operating system of which all metaverses, theoretically could operate on. And to me, that's a very interesting conversation. And I can introduce these guys, but I would do it very poorly. So let's go ahead and get to know these guys a little bit better. Dean, would you mind kicking us off with a little bit of your background and which is very storied, and how you got here today?
Sure. Yeah. Thanks for having us, Jay. So my name is Dean Abramson. I've got a nearly 40-year history in software development, engineering, and architecture. I could go all the way back to the early days when I was tinkering in high school, but I think the relevant history starts probably in the early 2000s, where I got on board with full tilt poker. And that's when I really began my modern journey of software architecture, system design, scalability. And I tell you, poker is an interesting story, and it fits nicely into the metaverse, because if you think about early 2000, we're talking about 20 years ago, we had built systems that handled 100,000 concurrent users in real time, that had conversations, that had persistence, that had a lot of the properties of the metaverse. And it's in a turn-based game format, but we really accomplished a lot back then. And so you could say that my gaming history goes back to that time frame. So I started building a system for full tilt. My goal, or my commission, was to support 100,000 users, and it was a long journey. It took 3, 4, 5 years before we finally got up to that point. And then the poker industry kind of crumbled, and then I went on my own, assuming that the poker industry would reboot. I tried to build a new poker platform. It was originally poker exclusive, but then we started adding more casino gambling verticals. And what really was born out of that process was a new technology that we call a database. It's kind of analogous to a database, but it's designed to run real-time software and deal with the issues of concurrency and low latency and synchronization between machines. And databases are really incredible. I don't think we're going to talk a lot about databases during this call. It's mostly going to be about the metaverse, but we will get heavily into databases in the future, because that's what makes everything that we do possible. And so It's been really 10 years or so that I've been working and focusing on scalability, and almost nothing but. And I'd say it's during the pandemic that a friend of mine, I was over at a friend's house, and he says, "Hey, I just got this Oculus Quest. Do you want to try it on?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I do. I've heard about it. I heard it was really great, but I had no idea what it would be like." So I tried it on. I literally only had about 5 minutes to play with it, and instantly my mind just went to places that I never thought were. I couldn't process what I was doing. And then from that moment on, I got home, I started researching just Oculuses or VR in general. And that led me, it took 3 months of researching before we actually ran across the word metaverse. That's how unpopular the word metaverse was back in the beginnings of the pandemic. But now obviously the metaverse has exploded, and the talk about it is everywhere. So it's really the once I put on the headset, realizing that the software that I built originally for poker and for gaming in general could be adapted and used to the metaverse. And then that set us on the course for what our company is currently trying to produce and solve. So it's
and I love to kind of pause and talk about that poker problem a little bit, because it's a very real problem that you had to solve for online gambling, and that's not exactly the topic of our conversation today, but it's a really good use case for microseconds count. And when you're talking about online versus in person, in person, there can be a mild delay between someone's reaction. But if the cards are dealt or someone's made a different move, you have to have you have to have everything in sync at all times, because if there's any delay, there's arbitraging that can happen. And suddenly it becomes an unfair game of different connection speeds and everything else, as well as poker at the end of the day is a community. It is only works, as kind of an engaging with live people. Nobody wants to go play a bunch of computers in poker. So you have to have that valid feel. And that requires kind of instantaneous connections, even on Zoom and on this connection here. If there's a 1 second delay, it's a very hard conversation to stay in, because you don't know when someone stopped talking and everything else. So that idea of keeping 100,000 people in sync, I can't even imagine, what the problems were that you guys had to solve. But where'd you start from, and how did you get to 100,000?
We started building a single table in development, and it works great when you got all the people in your office playing poker. And this is what every company goes through. You build a poker system, you design the table, and you design the gameplay and betting and folding and all that stuff. And then you get the people in your office to play, and you go, this works great. And then you get your friends to play, and you're like, this still works great. And then you start inviting some customers on there, and you get to like a few hundred people, and you go, this doesn't work as great as it used to.
Yep.
And you're like, what happened here? Something slowed down. And then you get to like 1,000 people, and then all of a sudden things go wrong. And then you start fix those bugs, and then you get to 3,000 people and stuff breaks even more. And then you fix that, and then you get to 12,000 people and stuff really breaks hard. And then you work your way to 20,000, and then everything breaks across the board. And so it's just this constant evolution of finding the scalability problem, breaking through it, and coming up with a new solution that will solve it. And I said, timing in poker really isn't that critical. It's a turn-based game. If I bet and you found out, or whatever move I make, if you find out like a half a second later, it doesn't change the experience all that much. But here's where when you're talking about poker, and I'm no longer in the poker industry, I will reveal poker companies make a lot of money. But I mean, we think of ourselves as banks. First and foremost, we are banks because we are pulling in and processing a lot of money, and that's the business. It's not about playing poker. It's about collecting money and collecting rake and managing all that. And so when you get to the large scalability problems and you're trying to get 100,000 people on the site, as your site grows, if you have scalability problems, everything slows down. So here's the trick. If you can speed up a move or an action, if I click a mouse and hit a button and my opponents or the other people on the table find out about my action 5 milliseconds faster, and there's 8 or 9 bets per round, and there's 4 rounds per hand, and we sped 45 actions up by 5 milliseconds, right? We've just picked up 200 milliseconds in the game, which maybe speeds the game up by 5%, 6% total. The revenues go up by 5 or 6%. When you're making a couple $1 million a day, that's a big deal. So
yeah, scalability.
If your system is non-performant, when you have 100 people and you're playing and everything's working fine, and then you get to 1,000 and you don't realize that the whole system just dropped by like 20%, and then you get to like 20,000 people, you don't realize that your system is really running 30 or 40 or 50% slower than it should be, and you're losing 10, 20, 30, 40 milliseconds per hand, your revenue is going down by gargantuan amounts of money. And so we built a system that is actually provable that when you're running at 100,000 users, you have the exact same performance as when you're running at 100 users. We can actually measure to a very, very, very small degree that the system is running equally efficiently and there's no extra delay. And then when you start getting to the metaverse, you're talking about 64 updates a second, real-time audio, processing audio for 4,000 concurrent users. We're talking about a completely different level of processing altogether. I mean, it puts poker to shame. So you're looking at 1,000 times more work than what we're really doing on a poker. So for 4,000 people in real-time audio in the metaverse is probably 1,000 times more work than processing 100,000 people playing poker.
I'm super excited to continue that. But let's jump over to Sean, because Sean, you have a slightly different background and equally as important in kind of the entire RP1 infrastructure.
You know what's interesting? My background. I always think about this is like what makes you who you are, right? And it's the experiences that you go through, both in personal and also in business. when I came out of college, I came right into the .com right before the bust. And I worked for a company called eCredit, which was revolutionizing the financial transaction industry. And I got to see thousands of business plans and business models and get to meet a lot of visionaries and people that have created unique technologies that needed our solution. And so from the get-go, I was able to look at so many different ways of looking at not only business, but technology, and also seeing how all of these technology leaders needed a way to get their information out to the world. And so there's always that kind of balance of having some revolutionary inventor or engineer or someone that sees something that can be done so differently. And then you have someone that can recognize that, understand the implications in the industry, and be able to kind of get on a soapbox and really share that information with necessary partners and individuals. Throughout my career, I've been kind of in a mix of technology and consumer electronics, where I've been able to see really unique products. In fact, I was able to put a cell phone product into about 80,000 storefronts. And when you think about 80,000 storefronts, we're talking about, it was a cell phone product, and it was in all the carriers, Radio Shack, to C stores like 7-Eleven, and to grocery stores and international as well. And we did that in about 2 years. And it was just exciting, to see a product, to really understand the implications of it, and really kind of get all the buyers of these major, retail outlets to understand what it can do for the industry. And that was just an eye-opening process for me, to really engage with all these different stakeholders and understand their perspectives and how to really get a product into those places and whatnot. And then I kind of bridged more into the SaaS side and technology, where I met another company that had some revolutionary product for hospitals. And again, it's like, what did I know about hospitals? Not a lot, but I understood right away the problem that they were solving. And so reaching out to the heads of the hospitals, we were solving a problem that was hitting 20-30% of their bottom line. And so it's really easy to really kind of come into a company like that, understand the product, and then try to build out kind of what that looks like, both from a company standpoint, but also how to actually see how that the hospital can implement that change and what that does to their entire organization. And when I got, Dean, obviously we started as friends, and, we got to learn about his technology, and forget about even the metaverse, just what he was able to do on the poker side. And I think he's being super humble. He actually built something that was extremely revolutionary, even if we're just talking about poker. And so the idea of poker is, and it's kind of rare. And a lot of people kind of say, what does poker have to do with the metaverse? And what it has to do with the metaverse, and what he solved, is how do you put 100,000 people in a single shard? And that idea of being in a single shard is super, super important, especially when we're going to eventually talk about the metaverse. And in poker, if you only had, I'll give you an example for shard. The idea is, Fortnite had a concert with 10 million people. So you'd say, wow, they had 10 million concurrent users. But in fact, it was really 80 to 100 people that were in an instance watching that concert. And they basically replicated that instance for the next 100 people, and so on and so on. But the person in concert 1 cannot communicate or interact with person in concert number 2. And so this is pretty much what's happening with the metaverse today, is people are creating these shards where a very small amount of people can kind of come together. But the impact of this is really, really, really important for the metaverse. And I'll give you a great example. Imagine if we were to shard some of the biggest social media sites on the planet. So think about like Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. Imagine if I were to send like a tweet, we'll use Twitter for an example, and I would tweet out to, let's say, 50 people, because that's the shard that I'm in. To tweet to anyone else, I'd have to leave that system and go to another system and then tweet to the next 50 people, and so on and so on. So it wouldn't be what Twitter is today. Like Twitter, what makes it special is I can reach anyone that's on the platform. When I send something out, all my followers will hear what I have to say. I can easily DM them on the backside. I can have all these communication things with everyone on the platform. And so the whole premise of the metaverse is everyone has to be connected. And so go back to the poker idea. Dean was able to put 100,000 people, and there's only a couple of other companies that were able to achieve this goal, 100,000 people in a single shard. And of course, for poker, super valuable, right? If I show up and there's only 100 people in my room, and let's say I want to play, high limit poker with $100, $200 blinds, what's the chances of, one of those 100 other people, wanting to do the same thing that I want to do? So the whole idea is, and it's super important, is everyone has to be in the same shard and be able to find games that you want to play with each other. And that was actually, in my opinion, the first idea of building a platform that potentially could support the idea of the metaverse in that perspective. And so obviously Dean was able to, when he left Full Tilt Poker, he started working on this technology. And the second part of this, so if you take the shard part, that's amazing what he was able to accomplish. But the second part is absolutely unbelievable from a technology standpoint. If you look at poker stars and party poker, they need between 1,000 and 2,000 computers to handle 100,000 users. He spent 3 years and he came up with an entirely new paradigm in network server architecture where he was able to run 100,000 users on 2 core of 1 server running that entire game. And so think about the implications of running $1 billion company. Instead of needing 1,000 to 2,000 computers, you can literally run it on 1 server. And so that all of a sudden says, what are the implications for anyone that runs a real-time application? You can see how quickly this can transition to something super special. So hopefully that, and we'll get into
and that's fabulous. And this is a scaling issue that we've been dealing with since Web 1 in a variety of different ways. And we're talking a lot about poker, but I think a good parallel to talk about when the floodgates open and the technology actually arrives to create the experience of which the users want. And I agree. 100,000, 500,000, whatever the number is, like everyone should be having the same experience in the metaverse, because one of the things I see right now is the reason it's so boring is it's just isolation. You're there, you're by yourself. And if you are there with a few other people, you have no idea who they are. It's hard to interact. There's a lot of things happening. But to jump back to the scaling issue and give some reference to something we've seen recently is for a long time, streaming video was like near impossible. The first Apple TV that came out, like for anyone that doesn't remember, you had to download, like you had to say like, I want to watch this movie. This is great. And then I'll see you in a few hours when it's downloaded enough that it can start the movie. And then sometimes it would stop because, hey, it needs to download the rest of these files. And I remember going through, like just the constant struggle with that. And then suddenly, MPEG-4 and the codec for streaming video got good enough where, and again, the original ones, they were just, 720p. They were just like SD and HD. They weren't even 4K. And now we can stream 4K to a phone with minimal bandwidth anywhere in the world because the codecs got good enough. And that unlocked just all these apps, all these streaming apps. There's an entire ecosystem and an entire economy that suddenly like, I can't live without streaming. I cut the cord 10 plus years ago and it was a horrible experience. And today it's just like people wouldn't even think about, terrestrial, watching shows. Am I kind of on with this, like if we can figure the codec out, if you can figure out the operating system for metaverses, it's going to have the same effect where suddenly we're going to go from, a niche thing that a couple people are using, but it's a struggle and it's hard, to really the floodgates of innovation, exploration, and innovation.
It's actually amazing that you brought up that example and mentioned that and asked that question. And the people watching this podcast are probably going to think that we had this all set up, which we didn't. But that is, if you look at what we do on a day-to-day basis and what we're trying to solve, whatever the metaverse is, I don't want to try to define the metaverse because it's different for everyone and it changes for me every single day. But one thing that we know at the core for our company that we believe to be true is that the whole of the software that we build has to be streamed. So really we're solving avatars. There's been avatars around for a long time. Avatars are really good. They're very nice. The problem is when you try to build a metaverse at scale and get 100,000 people in there, we can get 100,000 people into a metaverse, let's say, or right now our demo on a single computer does many, many thousand. The problem isn't getting the avatars in the server. The problem is getting that quantity of avatars in a format to the client that doesn't require pre-downloading. It's all about streaming. And that includes not just the avatars, the buildings, everything's got to be optimized to be streamable. And that example you gave with the video is perfect. You could theoretically say that a video is a bunch of JPEGs. I'm borrowing this example from stealing it from one of the other people on our team who really came up with it. I think it's brilliant. But a movie is just a bunch of pictures, and you could swap out the pictures very quickly. But at some point, you can't just send a whole bunch of JPEGs across the internet and expect to be able to do that in real time and put a movie together. So you have to invent a compression format like MPEG-4 that will actually compress it efficiently enough. And there's this moment when the average bandwidth per user meets the quality of the streaming or the compression format, and all of a sudden streaming is not possible. And so, yeah, sure, everything's going to get faster, bandwidth's going to get better, processes are going to get better, but there's a long way to go where a lot of the stuff that comprises what we believe the metaverse is going to require hasn't yet reached that MPEG-4 standard quality where we know that avatars need to be nearly 1,000 times smaller than they currently, not maybe not 1,000, but at least 100 times smaller than they currently are. And a lot of graphics and a lot of applications and other things need to fit into a format that is streamable, so that as you wander around the metaverse, you don't have to pause and ask to download something. And that would include things that you would traditionally go to app stores for, right? So normally if you want to use an app on your phone, you go find it in an app store, you opt to download it, and then it gets installed on your phone, and that process is fairly quick, let's say, unless it's a huge app, but it's reasonably quick. And then you can then launch that app individually and use it. But in our metaverse, at least the one we're proposing and putting together, just coming within proximity of an activity like a poker table or a self-driving car or some other game or some other utility, the software necessary to drive that will automatically be streamed to your computer and just run the whole It's like in the real world, when you go shopping, you don't have to download a shopping app. You just walk in the store and you start buying stuff. And so that's the way that we're going to be designing everything. And so it's all about streamability. If you don't have the streamability, I believe personally, you don't have the metaverse.
And I love this approach. And Sean, I'll kick it over to you here in a second. But I mean, this is a problem that has existed. It's not unknown. This is a problem that, billions of dollars have been spent on. Let's go to the big gaming studios, Xbox, PlayStation, all these ones. They're I think the largest game that I've seen, concurrent users is like 300 for maybe Battlefield. And it has major scaling issues, major lag issues in a variety of ways, and requires, the latest Call of Duty game, I think maxes out at maybe 50 people per side. So 100 people that will be on a shard to be able to play. And it's a 90 gigabyte download onto the Xbox. I only know because I had to download it 3 times to 3 different Xboxes last night for the kids. And that's not the experience that we want, correct? Like that doesn't scale.
You know what, if you think about it, I like to use there was a company back in the day, I'm sure most of the people listening and all of us probably remember Blockbuster, right? Mm-hmm. Blockbuster, you literally had to drive to a store and rent a video. And at some point, a company, Netflix, came by and say, well, wait a minute, let me just deliver it in the mail. That's a step better. People are pretty lazy. I don't want to get in the car. I don't have to go there. So if I can just pre-select something, it sends me in the mail. That's great. And then eventually Netflix says, wait a minute, this is a waste of time. Why don't we start figuring out how to stream this information at your fingertips, right? As soon as you want to consume new content, you can actually go to a site and easily stream this information. And they went to Blockbuster and said, hey, invest in us. We're the future of kind of what, the video and consumer downloads and these type of technologies are going to be super important. And Blockbuster didn't see it. Right? They couldn't see where the puck was going. And so, of course, we know how that played out, right? Blockbuster doesn't exist anymore. Netflix is one of the largest streaming giants on the planet. And I really believe, and I think Dean alluded to it really well, is the App Store. And so we're kind of forced to play through the App Store when we talk about these real-time applications, especially in 2D. And now we're conformed to like the iOS App Store where we have to give up some of our revenue. We're kind of stuck through a process that doesn't open it up like what the internet does. And the internet was so powerful because anyone could buy a domain, build a website, and deploy it. And anyone on this planet can go find that website, do commerce or whatever it looks like, and not have a company kind of control what you do in that ecosystem. And I really believe the future of gaming, and it's not just gaming. I mean, the metaverse is everything from gaming to IoT devices to expos to so many. It's a myriad of things. Think of anything you can do on the internet is going to happen in the metaverse, just with more immersive ways. But I do believe the future is going to be streaming. And so you have to start thinking about not only how do you connect all these users, but how do you stream this content through a website or through the web to any device. And in solving that problem, I think we're solving kind of what I believe the evolution of information delivery and whatnot.
Perfect. Well, Sean, let's go right into it. Let's hear what RP1 is working on, and how you guys believe you can solve this problem.
Well, I think it's super important to think about the metaverse as a whole. I think we're kind of in these AOL CompuServe days. I kind of like to think about, imagine if I built a website and announce to everyone, I built the metaverse. I mean, I built the internet, excuse me.
Yeah.
So imagine every website someone builds, they're like, I built the internet. And so it's like, wait a minute, is it a website? Is it an internet? Like, what is it? And I think that's the confusion today. It's almost become an adjective for anything that happens to be immersive or VR or AR. If you throw any of these terms, just add metaverse to it and it's probably better and you're going to raise more capital. I think if you do like the heavy reading and whatnot, the metaverse is the futuration of the internet. And the idea is this: the same way we open up a browser and we instantly can go to millions of websites. So there's guardrails that exist. We have the ability to find any website on the planet that anyone can build. There's extensibility, meaning anyone like WordPress can show up and build a company building tools for the internet. If you look at what we have today, I believe we have lots of immersive websites. If I look at like Fortnite or Roblox or all these different kind of games or places that people congregate, I look at them very complicated websites. So think of like Amazon.com on the internet. It's not a simple website. There's very complicated kind of building behind it. But the metaverse needs to be able to connect all of these pieces. It's not going to be one of experience. So imagine you're going to go in through some type of immersive browser and instantly be connected to Roblox, to Fortnite, to your workplace, to an expo, to a concert, to a museum. Anywhere that you want to go, you should be easily able to create some type of an account or your avatar and easily be able to move to any of these experiences seamlessly. And to do this, you're going to have to create new technologies, because right now we're only limited. If you look at Horizons, they're in the 15 to 20 range as far as how many people can congregate together. Obviously they don't connect to Roblox. If you look at like Decentral and all these other places, everyone's pretty much limited to under 100 people, and they have to shard those systems, and there's no interoperability. And so I think at some point you have to say, current forums and standard forums are trying to figure out how to connect these legacy systems together, which I don't believe is going to solve the problem. And most visionaries say the metaverse is actually 10 to 20 years away until hardware can actually solve this scale problem. Like, how do we actually put 1 billion people in one architecture and allow them to move in and out of different experiences and either share them together by themselves or in the public? The same way, like if I go to a museum, I may want to bump into somebody that shares the same interest in Van Gogh, or I may just want to be there with my friends. And I have that option in the metaverse. But you need that shardless system that can scale to everyone on the planet. And currently, again, being only at 15, how do you get there? So RP1 has basically built a revolutionary way of network server architecture where we can actually scale to everyone on the planet, being in the same network server architecture. And then we're also building the ability to deploy your own immersive website into the system where you're naturally interoperable in the sense where you can move from different experiences. So imagine you're literally walking around in a street and you can walk over and start playing Beat Saber with friends that have its own location. And so I can instantly send a link out into the internet and you and I can show up together through a browser and instantly start playing together with the two of us, with other people. Maybe 1,000 people are watching us. It changes the way you think about deploying this content at a level of scale that never was thought was possible. And so I'll give you a great example. I can describe it, but if you think about our first demo, it's pretty darn amazing. We're putting 4,000 full fidelity avatars in a 1 square kilometer VR space, all being streamed on the web with no pre-compiled downloads. It's absolutely extraordinary. And we've met with some of the biggest tech companies, and they're like, how are you doing this? We're spending billions of dollars trying to figure out this problem, and we're at 15, and you're running 4,000 plus people on literally 1 server. So we're not only addressing the scale problem, but also the cost.
One very old server too.
Yes, it is a 6-year-old server. So it's not like we have some special GPU or CPU. It's really the magic that Dean has created in software efficiency. And it's just, it takes someone, and I don't mind going on I hope you don't mind me going on a tangent.
No, I love this. Keep going.
What makes inventors special are ones that are not clouded by kind of how you're supposed to do things. Right. So if someone were to start building architecture, I get a lot of people would come in and build it the way you're supposed to. But the way you're supposed to is what's limiting us to reach another level. And everyone just says, well, if we can only hit this level, that means that that's the most we can get out of hardware. So everyone just blames the hardware and says, there's no more we can go. And then Dean here doesn't think that way. He thinks more like math, like what's possible, and is able to think in a way that other architects cannot. and he gets in there and tinkers for 3 years and discovers something. And it's to me, it's almost like discovering light. It's it's so impactful what he has created, but it takes someone with a light bulb to go off and say, I got it. Like, I've solved an issue. And to be able to solve that issue, now translate that to something that's needed, like the metaverse, it just made complete sense. And so that's why we created the demo, to show what most people thought was like, we came out on GamesBeat with Dean Takahashi, and he was like, look, what you're saying is amazing. You need to come into our metaverse platform and talk about it. And he's like, I understand you have no demo. I know it's all talk, but it's an important conversation. And I'll tell you, we actually got a kind of a unique response. People were like, okay, they sound like they know what they're talking about. It sounds like they may get there, but I don't believe you. Come on, we're at 15 people. Here's a multi-billion-dollar organization here, 15. Here's one that could do 20. The idea of getting into thousands, 10,000s, or even millions, come on, that's decades out. We'll figure that problem out somehow with either hardware. And so that's why we actually built the demo, because we had to start getting proof points out there. And so when we brought people in for the demo for the very first time, the response has been unbelievable. They're like, this is the first time I actually felt presence in a true metaverse, and in what could be the metaverse, meaning we can connect everyone going in and out of these different applications. And it was just one of those jaw-dropping moments where people are like, how did you do this? And of course, our first answer is, we can't tell you, but we still want to partner with you, because we don't want to build it all. You know what I mean? We want to partner with the entire industry to make this possible. So.
Yeah, and just as a real quick note for everyone watching, I have gone into the demo. In fact, I brought what I would refer to as an expert into the demo. I brought my 15-year-old son, because that's the technology of who we're really building this for. And I have to say that was maybe about a month ago. And still he's asking when he can go in and show his friends this, because, they're online every single day. They're playing games every day. They're Xbox, PlayStation, iPad, they're constantly interacting. Like, their lives are online. And in a demo of which there was only 6 or 7 of us real people, filled with, again, you guys were just generating, the all the inputs of which, if it was a real person, this is what they would be, maxing out on there. He said it was the first time he's been online that he felt like there was people there, that he wasn't in isolation by being online or in any way going to miss out. And I think that that's something that we really need to remember, is that we're trying to, with an immersive experience like Meta, not Meta the company, but Metaverse, the concept here, we're trying to eliminate the isolation that people are feeling. And the reason why Dean had never heard of this prior to COVID and quarantine is because, why? You can go to a concert any day of the week. You can go to the mall. You can do anything you want. But suddenly, when we lost that freedom, now we need an alternative. And it has to be, it's never going to be a one-to-one replacement for real life, but it has to elicit some of those feelings that people have. And I think that's why Zoom has become so prevalent during this time, or video conferencing during this, because we at least get to see people, but it's in small chunks. Dean, what, kind of thinking about the problem of interconnecting, people, and doing this in a shardless environment where you can have, let's just say, 100,000 people, experiencing the same thing at the same time. What's the limitations, from there? Like audio, video, interacting, purchasing is once you've kind of got that base level shard solved, does it scale well from there? Or is it more problems that will arise?
So the goal is to make everything as seamless as possible. There are seams across the fabric of the metaverse that are potentially just completely invisible, where you don't realize there's a seam there, but there is a dividing line. So when we do put 100,000 people in the next demo, or then it'll be 1 million, and then it'll be multiple millions. These are just all the information and everything that we're processing will be distributed across a large network of computers. And the trick is to actually, when you do put, I could be in an area of the metaverse, and you could be in an area of the metaverse that's really, really, really close to me, but technically we're being handled on 2 different computers, and potentially even 2 different computers in 2 different data centers across the planet. And the trick is to actually create that seam right there where you can't even tell. And we can, for the most part, we'll be able to do that. And we'll demonstrate that quite well in the next demo. Both you and Sean touched on a number of points, and you even mentioned like some of the games are limited to 50 people or limited to 100 people. And when we throw out numbers like 4,000 people or 100,000 people in the metaverse, I will point out that our goal isn't necessarily to create one individual activity that is participated by 100,000 people simultaneously. I'm sure that will happen. I have no doubt that there will be stadiums that will be rich in audio and experience, and that will just be a byproduct of what's available in the metaverse. But that's still not the primary goal of what we're doing. So when we say we want to get 100,000 people, it's more for your son, who was your son, right? That doesn't want to miss out, or doesn't want to miss out on the connections of the people who wander through the space. Really, what we're looking at in terms of what the metaverse can provide, it's about the social graph. And if you think about the social graph of a game, especially a first-person shooter game where your goal is to kill everyone as quickly as possible, you don't have a very large social graph. You go and you play Fortnite, the game lasts half an hour, everyone's dead by the end, and you don't have any long-term relationships that are going to last past the end of the game. And then you go play another game and you just meet a whole bunch of random new people, and you don't really meet them, you just try to kill them. So in something like the metaverse, which is more closely related to a long-term social media, we're talking about a game or an experience that lasts for much more than half an hour, or much more than an hour, or even a day, a week, or a month. Theoretically, if the metaverse were really big, as I believe it will be in the future, the social graph will have to last your entire lifetime. People will be born, will join the metaverse, and they will carry their persona on for the duration of their lifetime. So what we're talking about is getting 100,000 people together such that, or 1 million people or 1 billion people together, such that you can discover new friends, meet people with shared interests, and then meet up with as few obstacles as possible. And that's where the seamless comes in. So I can either talk to you, on a back end channel, or I'm in one location, you're in another location, and we can just have a conversation while we're doing our own thing separately, or we can just decide to get together and go explore a museum together, or go explore some fancy world together that we've never been to, take a vacation together, so to speak. So, I mean, there's a lot of technical challenges in making those seams go away. And there will always be some limit, I would imagine, somewhere that I guess will improve over time as we discover them and solve them. But I can imagine right now a lot of the problems that I'm dealing with are going to be problems that we won't have to worry about for a very long time. We're talking millions and millions of users before we start to encounter some of the problems that
I love that answer and that thought. So let's bring this back, this discussion over to, I think, something that will resonate with a lot of people. So let's talk about the idea of lots of metaverses, and kind of where things are going. And I think that's the reason why web works, web 1 works, is it was an entire industry of standards that were created. So you can have the Chrome browser, Safari browser, Firefox. I'm sure there's like 3 Opera users out there that are still really beholden to there, but you can go around to all the different websites and get relatively with a 99.9% the same experience that those browsers know how to render this, they know how to manage it. All the heavy lifting and the big processes are being handled by the servers in the background. If you had to download a different browser for every single website you went to, there would be a lot of not just people excluded, but there would be a lot of, again, just content that would never be seen or be able to shared. And it would kind of reference the ones that were able to, Betamax versus VHS, somebody's going to win and someone's going to lose. So when we're talking about, metaverses and gaming, my belief is it's the evolution of a web page. Web 1 was, on a traditional screen here. Web 2 is mobile, and Web 3 is going to be the ability to have, you can still look at it on your phone, you can still look at it on your computer. But now if you want to put on a headset, or you want to see an immersive view of something, that there's that extra layer that you can interact with. Is that what you guys are kind of envisioning a little bit as well?
I tell you, you are on fire with your questions. They're totally on point, because
you've watched all my podcasts, I'm assuming, and that's why,
Again, I will reiterate, this was not pre-discussed, but that is the crux of really, again, what we work on a day-to-day basis. And so I will admit we are approaching the metaverse from a different angle from other people. If you go into our demo, the first thing you'll probably notice is it doesn't look great. It's not particularly, let's just say there's not a lot of eye candy there. If there's a big thing to point out about our demo, is it kind of not very attractive. It's all about the server side stuff. And so, but we're looking at it from a different angle. Our goal is to solve the problems that have to be solved, which relate to scalability and interoperability and lots of other problems that if you can't solve those problems, there's no point in making it look good. A lot of other companies are focused on trying to make something that looks really good and assume that maybe Moore's Law or alien technology will solve the bigger problems. But we're saying, let's solve the bigger problems first. And so we're creating a whole bunch of technology that we need to solve the problems that we're facing. And so what we don't want to do is we don't want to take these technologies we build and set them in stone and say, here, you must use these or you are completely incompatible with us or go away, right? That's not what we're going to do. What we are going to do very, very soon, I'm going to start this, I'd like to say any day now, let's call it any week or any month now, but we're going to take what we've gathered, what we've put together, and then we're going to start opening it up to the world. And we will say, this is our best guess at what we need. It's pretty good. It gets us to this next phase. We think it can be better, and it can be better if the whole world participates in helping us bring these technologies and standards to the next level. By all means, incorporate the technologies that you need into these technologies that we've kind of are proposing. And together, as long as we can build a technology that works for us, that satisfies the bare minimum, whatever the world decides on, we will also adopt and interoperate with. And then we welcome lots of different companies and other companies that want to create their own metaverses, or we'll call them competing metaverses or compatible metaverses, whatever they're building. If we all decide that for streaming purposes, this standard is necessary or that standard is necessary, and no one had thought of this before, but oh, look, yeah, we do need that. Once we all agree that these are the components that are necessary for an infinite universe world, one that supports millions of people with streaming and all these different components, we'll get on board and share in the technologies that we've developed. We're open sourcing 100% of our client-side code. Our server-side code is going to remain a little bit secretive, but our client-side code, we are committed to open sourcing 100% of it and working with the world on standards and adopting whatever people decide is the best stuff.
I really that's mind blowing to think about from that perspective. And I think that let's take a second and really talk through what you just said there. The largest company right now today focused on metaverse is Facebook/Meta. $15 billion was the last article I saw that they invested in, and it looks like garbage, runs like garbage. There's no one that's interested. They can't even get their own staff to use it. And I think part of the problem that from my perspective, entirely my opinion, is because it's designed around this, like the thought around the Oasis, like Ready Player One. It seems like, Zuckerberg loved the idea that there's one metaverse and you're going to come into this one metaverse and everything is perfect. It's the most amazing thing you could ever have. And one person theoretically can own and design, the entire second world that exists. I disagree. And I think the marketplace disagrees that we just don't believe we need Facebook to be the beholders of our alternate universe. You guys are on the other side saying anyone should be able to make this content and it should interconnect, but no one person, irregardless, should have control over the next version of the internet.
Yeah, I think you've hit a couple of amazing points, and I think that there's a lot of problems with the metaverse. I think we can all agree, right? So if I'm a developer, where do I go build my immersive experience, right? Do I go to Altspace? Do I go to Horizons? Do I go to Decentraland? I have all of these options. And you actually said something really key. What makes the internet work is there's standards and guardrails, and then everyone can participate at any level, right? Anyone can build something. It's very abundant. It's very easy to get a domain and build a website. If you're a no code, low code, or full code, you have all your options. You can sit there and fully program your own website. You can go to Squarespace and have someone that gives you something that's pre-made. You have marketplaces that exist all over the place. These are all companies that have their own revenue streams. They have their own ability to play in this ecosystem. And I always ask a question: what would happen if we had 1,000 internets? And it wouldn't be what the World Wide Web is today, because as a business, where do I build my website? Yep. And as a consumer, which internet do I go to find that website? And so it becomes so convoluted, it would never work. And so the reason why the internet and AOL tried to do that, CompuServe tried to do that, everyone tried to control the window into this internet. But guess what eventually won? Once people figured out that this is a system that anyone can build on, eventually they built something that was open, and you just couldn't compete anymore. Now it was just the World Wide Web that anyone can participate. So the same thing's happening all over again, because it's not as simple as building a website. The complexity of building a real-time immersive experience is extremely expensive. It's very hard to do. And obviously, as we've talked to or alluded to, it's really hard to scale. So at some point, if I'm a small developer, I have to figure out a platform to work with, because they've spent the tens of millions of dollars to give me the tools and things necessary to build something. But then they conform me into these rules on what I can or cannot do. And so I kind of do the sniff test. If you can't build tools on a platform, then it's not a metaverse. If I don't own all my own revenue, it's not a metaverse. I don't own my own data, it's not a metaverse. And so then the question is, then which one is the metaverse? And I really see all of these as websites. These are I believe all these things that we're talking about will exist together on some type of standards, and then anyone else will be able to build another Roblox or Decentraland, and people then decide which website, quote unquote, is better, or where I want to go to because of the crowd, the feature sets, all these things. And so I think what's happening right now is, because technology can't enable the bigger picture, let's just go build a little websites, intranets, if you will, right? Yeah. And that's kind of what happened in the World Wide Web, right? Everyone built their own intranet, but at some point, once the internet grew, then it was like, wait a minute, I get it. Let's now build our own websites that allow us to connect these pieces. So I think the metaverse, we're trying to think of it as, what if we were to forget about what technology exists today? We obviously know there's caps and limitations. What would it take to build that? Those guardrails, the things that allow everyone to participate. And the first thing, obviously, that you have to solve is, first, how do you put everyone together? And if you can build that, then let's reach out to all the companies that have expertises in identity, in front-end graphics, in tools. We would love for tool companies to come in and build their tool, just like WordPress, and build that in the RP1 system. And they own all the rights to their tools, how they want to monetize. If you're a consumer or a developer, you come in, you own your revenue, you own your data. And as a business, you're going to say, wait a minute, now that there is one, because the onboarding issue is probably the number one problem with metaverse, is because no one knows where to go. Like, why am I going to spend time going to this small ecosystem when this stuff hasn't played out yet? And I think once you launch a platform that connects everybody, and then open up the guardrails to say anyone can build the next layer of whatever you want. And I believe multiple billion-dollar companies will build their module or their building blocks on top of the foundational layer that we're launching. And for me, that is what's going to help onboard the metaverse, because now you build one identity, and now I can go to millions of immersive experiences. And I believe Roblox and Fortnite and all these companies will eventually build on top of this, because once there's a big enough crowd, you're going to want to have that experience where you have that option, or someone else will build it. You know what I mean? That's kind of what's going to happen.
Yeah. The example I'd give on this one, to put some context for the audience listening that may not understand this, this is the difference between Broadway and YouTube. On Broadway, it is a big, heavy lift. There's very few people that are going to be able to produce a Broadway or off-Broadway show. You're going to spend a lot of time, energy, and money kind of getting everything together, producing this content, and then you're going to invite people in, and you could have absolutely amazing success. You can be cast and have 20 years of audiences and everything else, but you're never going to scale, and you're never going to reach the audience levels you can of YouTube, where anyone can suddenly create content. They can create their audience. They can have their own persona and identity online, and they can interact with others, quickly and fluidly with guardrails, of course. But really, again, it's more a matter of innovation, because if someone doesn't want to go to youtube.com, they can embed the video somewhere else. And so I think it's an entirely, just destructive way that we have to kind of look at what is out there today. I don't want to go into a Facebook Meta. I just don't. I'm so sorry. It is the time and energy to integrate myself and spend time on it. I just know it's going to reach a dead end somewhere. Like it just, because that's the way it is, because it's a single company with a singular vision. Whereas what Dean is talking about creating here is that, again, anyone should be able to create, some sort of metaverse, some sort of immersive experience. And if it reaches enough people and they kind of resolve with it, it should be free to everyone. So my next question to pull back in is Web3. We generally think of, cryptocurrencies, blockchain technologies, and metaverse all kind of as like Web3. But in reality, they're like metaverse and blockchain are like two entirely different conversations. They just so happen to be maturing at the same pace at the same time. What's your guys, either one of you can answer, what's your kind of concept for how to integrate blockchain technologies into RP1, and why does it make sense? If it makes sense.
I'm a little, I don't want to say I'm a tinfoil hat guy. I'm a little wary of blockchains and those technologies, specifically in thinking that they are the solution to all problems in the future. They might be great tools, but there are problems. There are some really smart people who have pointed out that decentralized blockchain technology do not always act in a decentralized manner, and that they may in fact create a large degree of centralization. Anonymity is the last thing you would associate with a blockchain, because everything is public and the tools are out there to pretty much pinpoint every single transaction to a real human being on the planet right now. So a lot of the things that you think they'd be good for, turns out they may not be good for. There are some things that we are planning on using blockchain technology for, but we're definitely not planning on making them the bedrock of the entire system. I know that there are platforms out there who are creating a metaverse, who are saying, yes, we're creating a metaverse on the blockchain. Everything is decentralized. Everything is on a public ledger. And that's the premise of their system is based exclusively or entirely on that. Whereas our premise is based on scalability and operability and things that are necessary to actually make the technology work. There's definitely going to be usefulness for blockchains, but it's not the bedrock. It's not the foundation of making a system work efficiently or optimally. In fact, it's probably the opposite of what you'd want, right? If a company trying their best to get 15 people or 20 people into a metaverse, just doing it any old way they can figure out how to make it work. If you are going to constrain yourself to building yourself on a blockchain, you can probably drop that number substantially rather than increase that number. So it's really going the wrong direction.
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. I think Dean used the perfect word. I look at blockchain as a tool, right? And I think we're in the early days of these tools, because I don't think they were initially built for real-time applications, and the idea of how to interact and store that type of data and have it easily accessible. I think the future is going to be lots of new blockchains that I'm sure will be built. And I believe those should be tools, and the decision on the developer themselves on how they want to use those tools. So if those tools make the experience better in their area of the metaverse that they want to build out, then so be it, right? It's not for a company to dictate this is the type of blockchain technology or this is what we're going to conform to and everyone has to participate. I think the whole premise of an open system is to allow different technologies, different modules to be built, and then it's up to the person building their area. So if Disneyland comes in and says we're going to build a replication of Disneyland in the metaverse, and it's important for us to have some type of identity piece or store the data in a certain way from a business use case, then they're going to do their research. They're going to figure out what are the necessary technologies to make that happen. Obviously, those things need to comply with the scale and the guardrails that we're introducing into the industry. And then it's up to Disneyland to figure out what tools they want to build and deliver an end experience that consumers are happy about. It's not for RP1 to sit here and dictate and say, these are the type of tools you should use, or this is how you should do things. Because I think a lot of people are pushing blockchain even into gaming. And I think people are struggling saying, well, what is the experience? How does it make the experience better? Right? Like, let's not just use it for argument's sake or freedom or this. And as Dean alluded to, there's a lot of problematic things with some of these technologies where I think people are misled into really how free you are in these systems and how they work. And I think it's we have to think about what is the final delivery of experience that you want to deliver, and then you figure out what technology you need to support that, and then you build it, right? And so the same way that you have the freedom of building a website and picking all the tools and things that you want to do and deploy, I believe in a metaverse, when you go to build your experience, you should have that, those choices, if you will, and then deploy an experience that could be amazing.
I love that answer, and it's very clear you guys are hyper focused on a large problem, and you're going to make sure that the tools and the resources available for others. Going back to our original concept of the MPEG-4 streaming involvement, the people that developed that protocol, the people that built it, whether you're streaming to your phone, a computer, an Apple TV, wherever the case is, that's up to them. The content that's made and produced in the movies and the shows, like, hey, that's up to the creator and the users to figure it all out. You guys are quite simply just the ones that are going to allow for the rails to exist and for the products to scale, because that's the one thing that will kill any innovation faster, is if you do hit that viral moment, you do hit that scalability moment, and you cannot take advantage of that. If somebody creates a metaverse, that and let's just say concerts, live events have been the number one thing for all metas so far. And 5, 10, 100 million people want to go experience this concert. If you don't have a roadmap to onboard them, I talk a lot about like Google Circles. Like, Google was in the prime position at the prime time to overtake, Facebook at a point when nobody was like wanting Facebook, and Google's, hey, here's our social network, but no, you can't come in. Like, it's here, but we're only taking like, a couple people a day. And by the time that they figured out the scaling issues, by the time they got it all done, nobody cared, and they discontinued the product, about a year later. So I think that you're entirely right that you guys are attacking a problem that, irregardless of how amazing someone builds a metaverse, if they can't solve that scalability problem, or have an inroads to solve that scalability problem from day one, doesn't matter how pretty it is. I've been in gorgeous metaverses. I mean, there's not one out there I don't think that I've visited, and I've left going, I've seen it. There's nothing to go back to. But I would bring a friend, but I can't bring a friend, and you can't do these things. So I'm really excited to see how this scales here in the future.
I will say, though, going back to the question you asked, and I know I gave probably a fairly negative answer, but there are 3 or 5 things that we are eyeing for inclusion of Web3 type technologies. If you're interested, I can enumerate those.
Go. I'm not gonna stop. You think I'm gonna stop you? Listen, you're the genius in the room. I'm just the guy behind the mic.
It's not that we're entirely skeptical. We have a healthy skepticism. We just want to make sure we're choosing the right technology for the right reason. So, but not in any particular order. So, identity. We believe that identity should be owned by the user. So what we expect to happen in the future won't be for this next demo, but expect that your own identity owned by you, which would include all of your persona, personal settings, passwords, and everything that's necessary to get into the site will be owned on your own identity blockchain. And we will just interface with an identity blockchain. And so it wouldn't be tied to one technology. So if Google had a blockchain, and Amazon had one, and Microsoft had one, and Crucible has one, and anyone else who wants to create an identity blockchain, you can use that to log into our system and to provide the security between your account and our system. And then, so forget about emails and passwords. It would just go through an identity piece, and that would be blockchain oriented. Obviously, we will be heavily supportive of payment processing on a blockchain. That's not to say that it will be exclusive of it. If someone wants to use credit cards, cell phone payments, Western Union, PayPal, any payment processor will work, but we also want to make it very convenient to use cryptocurrencies too, whatever is convenient. So there would be some form of a crypto component. Microblogging, we're eyeing for blockchain technology. This would be the future iteration of, let's say, Twitter or Instagram, somewhere in the metaverse. There's a lot of problems in running and operating a site like that. I know from some experience. Is my belief that running microblogging through a blockchain solves almost all of the problems, both from the user's perspective and from the operator's perspective. It's like a win-win-win all the way around. Even from the regulator's perspective, that's a third win. So the users win, operators win, and regulators win. We'll just call them governments win. So that's another place where we would expect it. The fourth place we would use blockchain would be in land records and ownership. The metaverse is made up of spaces, recording who has control of or ownership over which spaces. Blockchain might be a great place to store that. It's a public record. And then as a far fifth, I'm sure NFTs will work their way into the metaverse. We're not, I don't want to say we're not gung-ho on NFTs. I'm sure they're useful for something. They will be useful. I'm sure NFTs will work their way in there, but it's not like the whole metaverse is founded on exclusively NFTs. So NFTs will find their way in there, whether it's, hanging artwork or identifying ownership, or really what I see NFTs, the primary use of them is, chain of provenance, right? So the whole provenance of an artwork or intellectual property, right? So
yeah, and I got to tell you, with those answers, you guys are very much looking to integrate blockchain technologies. I mean, those are the correct answers. I think that some people get confused. Like, one of the worst uses for blockchain technology is streaming services or hosting, content on there. I mean, it's a ledger. That's what it is. It's designed for exactly that. And the concept of, we're talking about, metaverses, hundreds of thousands of metaverses, all running potentially in RP1 code. That is the one thing that I think we want from the Ready Player One movie, is that I have my avatar. This is me. This is my identity. And whether I want to go play poker, I want to go play a video game, or I want to go interact and watch a concert or something, that the avatar that I choose should be free floating back and forth, versus me having to have, I'm going to a brand new experience on a brand new website. Right now, everyone's a guest. But imagine if every website you showed up to, you could instantly say, here's who I am, and I don't need to talk to you. And I think Apple Wallet has solved a little bit of that, and it's been great to see. So I think that you guys are very much blockchain technologists, but you're just focused on a very different problem right now. So there's nothing wrong with there.
And I think the power. Oh, go ahead, Dean.
I was going to say, whatever Web3 brings and whatever it is that we're going to integrate into RP1 and our metaverse technology, it is one core concept, which is that users own their own content. And so that's what blockchain supposedly offers, and that's what identity would offer, and that's what we want to incorporate. So if it satisfies that goal, then we welcome including it within our stuff. If it's there just because people think it's,
currency, assets, identity.
Users have to own their own, and that would apply specifically. And when I said microblogging, right now, if you post a blog on Twitter, Instagram, and Twitter decides they don't like your account anymore and they shut you off, you've just lost all of your content.
Correct.
If you blog into your own blockchain and you own it, you can then syndicate that out to other companies. So now Twitter just becomes a syndication site. Just like if you publish a cartoon and put it in the newspaper, you control the cartoon, and the newspaper is just rebroadcasting what you've done. And that's the way I see blogging in the future. And that actually solves problems for all sorts of different reasons. But that's a super powerful thing. You own your content. You control it. You decide that Twitter has the right to publish your content, not the other way around. And if Twitter decides they don't want your content anymore, fine. They don't have to carry it. You still own it, and you can still publish it on another site. I'm sure some other site will raise their hand and say, "We'll take it. You can publish it over here. We'll take all your customers." So
love it.
And I think the technology, and just a small point, I believe when we stop using the terms NFT, that's when it goes mainstream, when it just happens, right? I think we're super excited about the idea of ownership and making sure that if I resell something, and believe me, protecting the artist and the creator and the users are super important. And I think this is what these technologies promise. So everyone's kind of gung-ho about these new terminologies because it's a way for me to make sure I make money today. And if someone sells it 6 months from now, I make money, and I can track all these transactions, and the promises of it are quite astounding, right? It's going to change the idea of how we look at who owns what and the value that you bring to a system. And I think those promises are what gets this conversation so juicy, and there's a lot of passion behind it. But I think if we want to onboard the rest of the world, a wallet can't be something that you have to, do 10 steps to figure out. It should just work, right? It's kind of like, it's funny. There's the IPFS solution with like historical storage or whatnot. And it was funny because there's like all these steps that we learned about these technologies or whatnot. And I'm like, I go, if we have to explain this to anyone, that's not when it's going to go mainstream. When it works like Dropbox, where I literally just put a file and somehow all the magic and all the things that you just described to me just works, then if it's blockchain, whatever technology behind there works, it's like to a consumer or to a business, it's like, hey, it just works. It's a great system. And because it has great technology behind there, when you lead with these terms, everyone's just like NFT. And again, I guess it's fun to throw out the term like it's, hey, NFT this and NFT that. It makes it more conversational. But I think when those technologies just solve the problems and you don't have to worry about them, then they're mainstream. And I think that's when we get to a point where these technologies really make a big difference on these platforms.
I completely wholeheartedly agree. When the technology becomes invisible, which is exactly the way it is in almost every, like, nobody understands what Amazon S3 or Azure is doing to deliver content around the web. They don't care. Does it work or does it not?
Yep.
And I think that's a really the important point that you guys have made here today is there's a very big piece of the architecture that's missing, that's broken, and you have not yet seen anyone else that has solved this problem, and you believe you have inroads to make it happen. But at the end of the day, you guys are just a piece of the puzzle. There's a lot of other technologies that need to be evolved and really focused on to get to the point where even if RP1, you meet your goals and you can have 10 million people on a single shard, there's still a lot of other pieces that others are going to have to come with and partner to create what will be an open, immersive experience for anyone in the world to be able to experience, which is very similar to what Web 1 and Web 2 had resolved for us.
I agree.
Dean, it was really amazing to see 4,000 individual kind of instances on a single shard. And I know the graphics are nothing to get excited about, but again, it was the concept, it was the audio. I got to tell you, the audio was what really kind of brought me and brought my son into kind of that experience. What's kind of next? I know you guys are working on your next iteration of that demo, and we talked about it a couple months ago. Where are you guys at today, and what's that roadmap look like?
Yeah, that demo was a really big milestone for us because we've been talking about it for a year and no one believed us. I mean, everyone's like, that's impossible. We talked to a few people, like, if you get anything more than 100, I just frankly don't believe it at all, period. It's just not possible. And so we brought people in and we've got 4,000 in there. And so for a while, we encountered a lot of disbelief. But now enough people have read about it. So when they come in the demo, they're like, okay, well, it works. Obviously, everyone's been talking about it. I want to see it for myself. And then they get that experience of audio or presence that really makes it exciting. Our next demo, or I will also say the current demo is invite only, and we bring people in and hold their hands and walk them through the demo. The next demo will be public. It will just be open. You'll be able to go to the website, go in as a guest, just walk right in. Probably won't even have to create an account. You can create an account, save your settings, and start playing around in there. And there will be reason to hang out there, and there will be reason to go back. It is incredibly important to us that we create something that has value. It's like you've mentioned, you go into a lot of the other metaverses, and even our current demo. Once you've seen the demo, you're like, wow, it's amazing. I didn't know this technology existed, but we know as well as you, there's no reason to go back to the demo. There's nothing left there other than the one and only one experience you have right now. So we're creating something in the next demo that will have value, that will instantly say, I could come back tomorrow, experience something new, or continue to build on the experience that I started. I will also say that we're targeting 100,000 people in the space, so 4,000 to 100,000, shardless, full fidelity avatars. We're talking obviously spatial audio, full hand, finger, eye movement. It'll probably be better than what you have, better avatars, better quality, everything. But here's what I'm going to say, and it's hard to explain this, and it's hard to imagine this, but trust me, when you get in there, and if you dive into the technology, and especially if you're a developer, and we will be inviting developers to build and contribute to the next demo, the 100,000 user milestone that we've been kind of touting or saying we can do will be insignificant. It is not a significant factor of what the next demo is about. It's an asterisk. It's like, oh yeah, there's 100,000 people. It's exciting. Big whoop. Because it's the other stuff that we are introducing. It's the way in which our metaverse operates. It's the way in which people can develop. We have this thing we call the activity stack, which we believe is a revolutionary way of designing software. The scalability we will introduce at a later time that will allow everyone to experience what we experience with our poker site, where instead of 1,000 computers, you only need a couple core. That will be a key component of what we're offering in a future iteration of of a release once we're in a bigger product. But at least in the next demo, you will be able to experience moving in and out seamlessly of different experiences, different games. You will not only feel presence, but I'm promising that you will feel an openness like you've never felt. I've heard people say, like, if you go into different demos or different experiences now, that you're really going from one snow globe to another. And it's very claustrophobic. Even when you put in your headset and you go into your home room, you can't leave the room. I just want to go downstairs and explore. And we're going to provide an openness. So you'll have both presence and openness, a whole universe that you feel like you'll be able to explore like you've never imagined before. And so there's all these different things. And if I believe, like you said, audio is big for you. A lot of people find audio. So 4,000 users does not always register as the number one feature of our thing. But when people go into our next demo, you list all the things that they think were like really either mind blowing or exciting or that really was felt. I think the 100,000 user mark will be third or fourth on the list. I don't even think it's going to register in the top three.
I can't wait. Sean, for anyone that's interested, wants to kind of know more, get involved, invest, where are you guys sitting today?
Yeah, we've been really fortunate. We use the term bootstrap. We have great founders that have helped really, help build this company from a financial perspective. So we haven't taken any outside capital, but that's going to change. We actually just finished our deck, and we are looking to raise a sizable amount of capital. We're probably looking to bring about $100 million into the company from the get-go. And I think that's the only round we'll probably ever have to do. And so we kind of propose the idea that if you had a chance to invest in, the internet back in the day, what would that look like today? And we're hopeful that we'll have quite a few partners that want to, be a part of this journey with us. But I think the bigger thing is really figuring out how to partner with the industry. We've reached out to the top gaming engines. The responses have been unbelievable. I mean, we've had, I want to get into the, two biggest game engines. One of the guys was, been there for 15 years, said it was the best demo of technology he's seen his entire career. And they all are like, how are you doing this is the first question. And the second thing is, we don't know how to partner with you. We got to like, we didn't know someone out there is doing what you're doing. Now we have to figure out what does that look like to engage. And so for us, it's not about actually competing with those companies whatsoever. In fact, for us, we want to partner with everyone to help make it easier, more efficient, and really bring these pieces together. And so for us, it would be partnering with the gaming engines, maybe like a Unity where they can be the tool company on our system and build out elaborate tools for all the developers where they can deploy web-based, content into the RP1 system. Potentially work with like Unreal and Epic to actually figure out and solve how do you get Unreal level graphics to be able to stream in real time through the web, and really start building identity companies and really start figuring out other companies' expertises that can bring to the table and help these building blocks. And so for us, like Dean has alluded to, we're taking a stab at a lot of these things, like the activity stack, the avatar system. But we do hope that someone will take that baton and take it to the next level. But you have to still build the first. It's kind of like if you built the internet, you got to build a few websites first, right? You got to show what it means to be a website, how you find the website, how do you interact with that website. And then once people are like, oh, I get it. And wow, it's cheap and it's easy and I can move from one website to another. So that's really what Demo 2 is going to accomplish. The idea that you can easily just go through a link and start playing a game and there's no downloads. People are just going to be like, wait a minute, this is just too easy, too seamless. And then all of a sudden your friend can join you and multiple friends can join you, or I'm done. I want to go over here and do something different. And I want to add just one word to what Dean said. Discoverability is actually the exciting part about the metaverse. The idea that you can just go to a game and you're stuck in this one place and that's it. And then now I have to leave and figure out some ecosystem to go to another experience. The idea that I can explore different things that different developers build is the same type of discoverability that we have in real life. And to me, that is the exciting part, is to get people to feel that level of presence and discoverability and be able to share that with either new people that you meet or friends that you want to be with. That is going to be, I think, the power in what we deliver in Demo 2. And hopefully that will be, I think, our big coming out party, because I think people, it's hard to explain that. Like even coming away from this podcast, people were like, I think I know what they do, but I still have all these questions or something. But when you actually go in there, it's funny, actually. I'll give you one anecdote. I talk about our demo all the time. And then the funny thing is when I finally get to invite the person and they give me responses in the conversation, they're like, oh, 4,000 people, I've heard, okay, scalability is great. But then they get in the demo and they're like, Oh, like, wow, when you say 1 square kilometer space, you're talking about a massive world that is streaming live on the web. And wait a minute, there's 4,000 people that I can go up to and handshake and talk to all over this place. They're like, wait a minute, that just didn't register when you explained it verbally. Like, now that I'm in there and experience it, and we hope that that experience times 100 is going to happen in demo 2, where people not only get that experience, but now I can walk over to an area where there's Beat Saber running, and I literally can start playing Beat Saber by myself or with a friend. And then all of a sudden I'm like, wait a minute, there's a theater over there. Let's go check that out. And there's a live theater going on, and then maybe a concert that's over in a whole different area. That is when you really start to see the bigger picture of what a metaverse can deliver to the planet. And that's when I think a lot of people will be excited about what RP1 is doing. And so I think sometimes you just got to go build it and start it. And then eventually, hopefully, a lot of partners will join and help us in the journey and delivering what I believe can be the future iteration of the internet. So super exciting.
I love it. I love it. I mean, again, I can't be more excited to see this. I think this is one of the biggest needs that right now metaverses need to be able to have. I'm so upset with them stealing the name, but we'll come up with a new one here. But I mean, this is really exciting. So yWhales, again, lots of things coming down the road. We'll make sure that we are kind of following RP1. But this is Sean and Dean from RP1. We'll see you guys next time. And again, tons of follow up. I think are coming here soon. So good to see you guys, and really appreciate you swinging by.